Namaste and welcome to Vicharmanthan. At Vicharmanthan, we churn ideas with experts from a range of disciplines to explore important issues facing British society. We make a conscious effort to explore ideas under the scrutiny of Dharma. Does it benefit all? Does it minimize harm? And does it invoke compassion? Using these parameters, we can discern whether an idea is sustainable and whether it will enable society to flourish. My name is Shyam, and I will facilitate this evening's discussion on what is the role of culture in tackling climate change. To give you an outline of this evening's format, the VM is 1 hour 30 minutes, consisting of a discussion with our speakers followed by a Q&A from you, the audience. Please interact with us on the YouTube chat. Pose your questions to our expert speakers, and I'll do my very best to get through as many of these as possible. To start the conversation, before we have the opening remarks from the speakers, I will introduce the topic. So, it is widely accepted that we face an international climate change challenge. There is an increase in flooding, droughts, forest fires, all impacting our livelihoods and causing deaths. The IPCC, which is a panel on climate change, declared that human-caused CO2 emissions must fall by almost 50% by the year 2030. And this is so we can keep global heating below the 1.5 degrees Celsius point. In the light of COP26 starting tomorrow, how should policies and rules be derived to tackle climate change? The IPCC also reports that behavior change and demand-side management can significantly reduce emissions. How do we sustainably bring about cultural change to reduce our carbon footprint? And for our viewers watching, do you really understand what actions have a carbon footprint? For example, what is the carbon footprint of your genes, the food you eat, when you drive to work or even go on holiday? Do you feel the government is enabling you to reduce your carbon footprint? What is it that would help you change your behavior to help reduce this carbon footprint? Now, to introduce our speakers and for their opening remarks. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to give the opening remarks. Our first speaker is Judy, Ling, Wong. Namaste and welcome, Judy ji. Judy ji is an honorary president of the Black Environment Network. She was awarded a CBE for her services to heritage. She is included in the Forbes list of the 100 leading environmentalists in the UK. Judy ji, for your opening remarks, could you please answer, is culture important to overcoming the climate change challenge? And if so, why?
Good evening to you all. I'm so pleased to be together with you for this important topic. People and nature across cultures are bound together in crisis. My work with Black Environment Network has given me a very particular overview of the relationship of people and culture. In 1987, we asserted that there is no such thing as a purely environmental project. A so-called purely environmental project is one that has rejected its social, cultural, and economic dimensions. I was inspired to coin the term cultural visions by an early experience at Black Environment Network. We were working with a group of Bangladeshi women that wished to find somewhere to grow vegetables. The final evaluation question was, what was the best thing about this project? The typical answers would have been good fresh food, better health, meeting new people, or simply the pleasure of being outdoors. However, The answer of the group blew me away. They said the best thing about this project is that our bare feet are once more upon the soil, our mother. It demonstrated a visceral connection, emotional, physical, and spiritual, all at the same time. A connection that is about a deep human need with all the dimensions of what it means to be alive on this planet. Such highly connected people will never do anything to harm the planet. Many of us live in a world of urban deprivation without a single shred of living green. It is notable that COVID lockdown has pushed us all to look inwards for answers to life. Cultural visions can move us away from the bleakness of a science-dominated world to one of inner richness and passion that informs and drives actions in a holistic way. Let's look at some examples. When I was a young person wandering around in southern India, early in the morning I saw village women come out of their houses and draw a rhythmic pattern with rice powder on the ground in front of their homes. To my astonishment, when they finished, they just took a broom and swept the beautiful creation away. I mean, they didn't take a photo, stand admiring it, or think about the work they had put into it. I was told it is an act of devotion and a prayer for invoking the blessing of their homes. This demonstrates completely an unmaterialistic way of being linked to values of beauty and connection. Tomorrow and every day, they will do something else equally beautiful but different and sweep them away. In Mexico City by the cathedral, I saw traditional dancers. I asked them why they were dancing there, and they said, well, the cathedrals were built on top of our sacred places. So when we dance here, we're dancing on our sacred land. The power of identification with sacred land in many cultures, such as the First Nation peoples of America or Australia, have seen them refuse the millions offered for mining resources. A member of the Huichol tribe said to me, in the West you talk of Mother Earth, but here we also have Father Sun, Grandmother Moon, Brother Deer. When we take care of our environment, we are only taking care of our family. In Buddhism, is kindness to all living things not the equivalent of the challenge of sustainable development? You know, if we look into the deep heart of the climate emergency, we see the failure of two fundamental relationships. If we love nature deeply enough, we cannot possibly damage the planet in the way we have. And if we love people deeply enough, we cannot damage them. To end this talk, let's take something from the Tibetan ageless wisdom cosmology. In the West, love is highly romanticized. Within the ageless wisdom, there's a term called love wisdom that sees love as something leading to sharp strategic actions motivated by the love for people. Within that way of seeing, policy is the expression of love wisdom, and its outcome is beauty. The beauty of caring for nature at its best and the beauty of caring for each other. I propose that ways of seeing and being embodied in diverse cultures can stimulate and show the way to a very necessarily different green future with all its challenges, including climate change. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Judy G, and thank you for your slides and introduction. Our second speaker today is Professor Atul Shah. Namaste and welcome, Atul Ji.
Namaste, and thank you so much for organizing this event and inviting me.
Atul Ji, Atul Ji has published multiple books, including Reinventing Accounting and Finance Education for a Caring, Inclusive, Sustainable Planet, He has experience in accounting, finance, leadership, and diversity. And on the 22nd November, he is going to be a keynote speaker at the Oxford COP26 event. And now, Atulji, for your opening remarks, could you please answer, how do you see economics playing a part in influencing society's behavior towards climate change?
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you to the audience, to all the founders of this amazing organization. And it's so nice to see volunteers working so hard and so professionally to put this event together. The Anthropocene, we are living in an era of the Anthropocene. Scientists have now said that there is evidence that the last 50 years, there is one species which has done irreversible damage to the planet. And this is a science which has been agreed by people from all over the world, scientists from all over the world, top experts. And that species is the human species. Now, Shyam, your question about economics. Economics, sadly, all my years of research, I studied at the London School of Economics, which is regarded as one of the top in the world, has excluded nature from its equations and has been a big part of the problem that we are living through today. So your whole approach to putting culture as a critical part of a new era, which is at peace with our environment, is so critical, because economics has played a part in destroying culture. And I'll tell you a very simple story. Mahavira, the founder, well, the 24th Tirthankar and the latest prophet of the Jain tradition, of the Jain Dharma, spent 14 years meditating in rainforests in northern India, observing the deep interdependence of nature. So his whole wisdom came from the forest, right? And what has economics done today? Economics has destroyed forests, converted them into land, agricultural land, which can then be used to make a profit, right? But it takes thousands of years to build a rainforest. Planting trees will not create a rainforest. In the same way, if we can visualize culture as if it were a rainforest, and all of us have been in forests at some point in time and have experienced the amazing music, the silence, the beautiful air, the crisp air. Culture is like a rainforest. And unfortunately, so much of culture, as Judy very well put, has been destroyed in the last 200 years. And unfortunately, just as a rainforest cannot be rebuilt by planting trees, neither can culture. And that is the sad part. So we're talking about net zero as a technological solution to climate crisis, because we really can't do net zero culture so easily. Thank you.
Thank you, Atulji. So some really nice points from both of you. And we've highlighted that that culture is crucial, and that you put an analogy of the rainforest, and as the rainforest is being destroyed, so has our culture. So my first question, should I say, to Judy Ji, what type of cultural values would support tackling the climate change?
We have lived far too long in a culture that is driven by bleak scientific evidence. All the policy is evidence-based, but in order to make the right decisions, the science is important in terms of providing knowledge and detail, but we must move from the heart. In order to move from the heart and from the spirit, we must reach back into the culture where the holistic presence of spirituality, of emotion, of connections that are holistic to the earth really run the show. Because if you look deeply into the heart of climate change, you'll find that destruction is based on a lack of relationship to culture and a lack of relationship to people and nature. So we do not protect it because we have no relationship with it. We do not care. We just take, until suddenly we find that the whole thing is broken, and we realize that the true power that we are in the face of is the power of nature. It's actually more powerful than anything else, than money, than profits, than all the things that we think we need in this life. But without actually taking care of nature, everything is going to be devastated.
Very interesting. So there's that one word stuck out from me is it should come from the heart. And so just following on from that, and Atulji, please do always feel free to say something if you've got some input as well. Just following on from that, what societal behaviors will lead to a culture of what you speak about?
Yeah, thank you. In our tradition, we have a beautiful word, sarvodaya. Sarvodaya means compassion towards all living beings. The Jains also use the phrase ahimsa in that context. Now, economics has no concept of sarvodaya. In fact, economics has no concept of daya, even daya meaning compassion. So, even my field, which is finance, for a long time, people used to say ethical finance is an oxymoron, that the two do not go together. But that is the crux of the problem. And actually suddenly now with the climate crisis, people are now talking about sustainable business, sustainable finance, and sustainable economics. So there is an interest in this area, but at the same time, there is very little connection with ancient, timeless culture, wisdom, and tradition, which our Manthan is espousing. That the dharmic philosophies are timeless and timeless in their wisdom. And what is fascinating, Shyam, and I keep repeating this, that these philosophies were developed not in a time of climate change. Sarvodaya was not done to suddenly protect the human species from climate change, but they were done and they were seen as the right way to live. So when we speak, and all my dharmic friends, I encourage you to hold your head up with pride. When we speak about sustainability, we speak from a very authentic culture and from a track record of respect for all living beings. And one other point I'd like to say, Shyam, and I go to academic conferences all over the world. I write academic papers, academic books. I'm an educator, and business is one of the most popular courses people take from all over the world. And very rarely is the kind of wisdom you and I and we are talking about, and Judy are talking about, in the curriculum. Rarely, because the curriculum is mainly secular and is mainly utilitarian and instrumental. So really the core business or economic idea of profit and profit maximization still remains. So now with the environment, you get a little bit of okay, let's put a bit of masala for environment and something for social responsibility. But the crux of that paradigm, and the paradigm which is based on a frontal attack on nature, right, has not changed. Even in India, I'm sad to say, Shyam, and business schools all over India, including top business schools, still draw from the American economics and finance paradigm. And we know America stole the land from the Native Americans. You know, they destroyed the environment. They dug underground for oil. Indians never thought of digging underground for energy, right? They never thought that if it's taken 10,000 years to make this oil, should we really be doing that? You know, and will we be able to replace and replenish it? Some other terminology like resource, nature as a resource, right? The othering of nature. So nature has always been seen by many sciences and even some cultures as other than the human. You know, this othering of nature is the biggest problem we are facing today. And we need a new science which is inclusive of nature and which has integrity at its heart, not some new sustainability consultants who've suddenly come up with a new formula of net zero. No, please consult the authentic experts, the people who have been born and raised in these cultures and understand how nature, we are nature and nature is us. Thank you.
Thank you, Atulji. So that's interesting, and for the viewers who have children going to school or maybe are teachers, what are your thoughts on what Atulji just said? Is it that the syllabus that we have focuses predominantly on economics and maximizing for individuals, or is there a large concept or enough of a concept of nature and culture in the syllabus? What are your thoughts? Please put them in the chat. Judy, do you want to? Can you please input into this? And more specifically as well, are there examples of behaviors, specific behaviors that we feel that society should be implementing, and that would then aid climate change?
Nowadays in the environmental sector, we talk a lot about contact with nature. You know, nature is so beautiful. In a way, it's almost unnecessarily beautiful. You know, it has so many variations and so on, that it gives us forms and colors, sometimes so strange and mysterious, even goes beyond human imagination to see it. It is marvelous. And the UN Deputy Secretary General said very recently, she said that the battle for sustainability will be fought, won or lost in our cities. And when she said that, what she meant is that in a way, you know, some of us that are older has had the privilege of contact with nature. But now it is an urbanizing world. In the UK, 80% of our population live in urban areas. And I showed you in my PowerPoint that there are areas where there's not a single shred of living green. And our children in their schools and so on also have this bleakness of education where everything is about so-called facts, evidence about everything, but nothing about relating to it as part of our wholeness and richness and aliveness on this earth. And unless we have that and have those feelings, then it means that we can just take anything. Oh, Mother Earth is just there. There's something there. We're just going to dig it up. We want it. We have it. We want trees. We want to burn something. We chop the tree down. So without any relationship or feeling. And this is what is really wrong. Because, for example, I'm not anti-science at all. Science is a wonderful sea of knowledge. But that knowledge should be bent to serve us and to serve the earth. It should not be used as a fixer and as something for exploitation, so that when we damage the earth so much, then we run to science and say, can you fix it? Now, what can you now do to fix it? No, we should actually use science to actually reveal the marvel that is around us, the marvel of the body of the earth, the marvel that is the body of us as human beings. We're truly marvelous miracles of nature, and yet we're damaging it because we have no holistic relationship of it and have begun to move away from the appreciation of its beauty and its wonder that inspires our love for it. Because love is really the most powerful force. If we truly had a love for nature and for people, we would fight for the right things to be done.
And what are these right things, Judy? So for our viewers that are watching now, for them to have that love and to have that, what sort of behaviors do you foresee the society having to actually use? Next time you come to VM, I want you to say, society is brilliant because they are doing X, Y, and Z. What is that?
We need to combine that love for nature and people with true action that reverses all the damage that's been done. For example, people need to find out where their chicken comes from in the supermarkets. We are actually buying cheap chicken. We feed it unnaturally. We don't give it natural food. We feed it soya so that it can grow very fast. And it grows so fast that if you do not actually kill that chicken at the right date, and it grows even more, its legs cannot stand its weight and it will collapse. It is ugly. And that soya comes from the Amazon, where we actually chop down rainforests to get the soya to have this unnatural process of pushing our animals to feed us in this unnatural way. So when people actually begin to have an interest in the welfare of animals, in the quality of our food and our lives and so on, they will want to really fight for change, to put it back into the holistic processes that guarantees the beauty of the earth against the suffering of animals and the suffering of nature and the suffering of human beings. All the pesticides and so on, they're all hurting us. The air pollution is hurting our children's lungs. They say that when children are actually growing up in an area where there's high air pollution, guess what? Their lungs are smaller, and they will have smaller lungs for the rest of their lives, less able to cope with life in general. So all these things are hurting us. It's gone beyond what it should be. We need to reverse the processes out of love for people and for nature.
Excellent.
Yeah,
So,
if I may,
yes, of course.
I'd like to speak about family and community. Through family and community, we experience sharing. We experience kindness. We experience relationships, trust. Yeah. And that is what VM and your amazing group of volunteers so beautifully espouse. And in fact, that is also core to our own Indian culture and dharmic tradition, family. We keep contact with extended relatives, and our weddings are minimum 600-700 people, and all of that is kind of normal, right? And so although economics and business doesn't really talk about family or community, Raghuram Rajan, who is a world famous professor of economics at the University of Chicago, wrote a book recently called The Third Pillar. And he said states and markets need communities. And so the third pillar was communities. And unfortunately, in his book, he refused to talk about the Hindu Dharma and the living culture and communities that we have all over the world. He spoke about it in a historical sense, but not in the contemporary sense. And this is what I would like. And as I see, as an academic and a social scientist, I have seen that the West has a real problem with dealing with living culture, living kindness, living communities, right? And interdependent faith-based communities, because it has lost that sense of connection, that sense of experience, and it perhaps sometimes feels a bit threatened by that sense of community that we have. But that is what the world needs for a sustainable society, because interdependence needs to be more than a theory, it needs to be a lived and a living experience. And so I say to our VM listeners, dive deep into your Dharma. Learn about Dharma. I know that our education systems, whether it's school or universities, generally speaking, do not give space to any of this, or if they do, it's at the margins. But to us and to me as an educator, I've seen that is our core strength that we are bringing to society, our most important strength, that self-confidence that we have, that sense of pride, and that feeling that we are not alone. Loneliness is the biggest problem of the 21st century, but people who belong to communities are never alone. So celebrate all the great things that we have inherited. Nourish them like we would like we would water a tree. Nourish them, enjoy them, and of course, share those values with others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, some really interesting points. So, and I think we've come up with quite a few things. I've just listed heart, compassion, kindness, communities, and it's all these behaviors or all societal culture which would bring about a better sustainable place. So I think that is what we're saying. So now we sort of laid a foundation of where we want society to be. Let's look who and how does the UK move forward? So who needs to do this, and how does it need to happen for the UK to move forward to achieve a culture that you both describe? And Judy, do you want to go first on that? And then maybe Atul Ji can give a few words as well.
There are two dimensions. One is that people themselves, motivated by their heart to take care of people and nature, can do things in their own lifestyles. They can also campaign when they see things that are wrongly done and so on. Like I gave the example of cheap chicken and how it's damaging the earth. Go to the supermarket and say, we won't buy your chicken. Or you can go to the supermarket and say, where is your chicken coming from? How are you actually producing? To have the information for us to have the choices that we can live in the way that is from our heart. Secondly, we must realize that beyond what we do within our own lives, we are a society, and there are things that we cannot do except at government level and at international government level. And that is where COP26 is. So that those systems that have been long put into place by systems of exploitation, of the super rich denying all the things that a lot of people do not have. Believe me, in the world, there is no lack of money. We are swimming in money. It's who has it. For example, when you look at Biden recently trying to produce this social program for the United States, and he decided he will do it by taxing the rich for 3.5 trillion. It's now been trimmed down to 1.5 trillion after all the argument. But he thought of actually taxing the rich, and the degree of getting that amount of money, it doesn't even hurt the rich. There is so much money. The rebalance of distribution so that we are not against people being rewarded for the tremendous work that they do and their intelligence and their efforts and so on. But do we really want people who have that intelligence and those skills to be thousands and thousands of times richer than people at the bottom? So we need to think, what is the gap that is acceptable humanly? How much do you need to be happy? Is it 50 times what the person at the bottom earns? Is it 300 times? These are the questions where we're saying, not that you can't have wealth, but let's not have ridiculous wealth that hurts so many people. So these are the big questions that are on the table for us to move into the future, to have social conscious structures, to have people-centered environmental policy, so that we can really have a world in which it is actually possible to take care of people and nature.
Thank you. Atul, just taking a point there, Judy G speaks a lot about, as this government would call it, leveling up. Do you think that there is a way or a method about how we maybe how we value things is incorrect? So at the moment, you've also said today that money or economics has been the focus. So is value incorrectly defined, or could it be better defined? Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. We are living in a very materialistic era. Inequality is, as Judy rightly said, a huge problem. I mean, 80 families own 50% of all the world's wealth. I mean, how can such a planet be sustainable, right? So sadly, we talk about nature. What is the nature and limits of money? You would think is the first part of an economics or finance or accounting course. And guess what? It's never discussed. It's never discussed. We have allowed money to control every aspect of our life. And as a result, we have broken that sense of volunteering, selfless service, seva, the beautiful idea from India about selfless service beyond the self. Judy was speaking about evidence-based science. I'm often find science is completely looking in the wrong place. What is the science of a tree? A tree stands firm night and day, never goes to sleep. On a hot day, a tree gives us shade. And when we are hungry, it gives us fruit. Doesn't charge a penny for it, right? It converts sun, soil, and water into the beautiful selfless gifts which we call fruits. Now, isn't that a science that we need to learn from, where there is no personal motive? The tree doesn't have any selfish motive, and trees have been there before us and will be there after us, right? So where are we looking? We're looking in the wrong places. We're looking with our eyes closed and our prejudices. We want to confirm that money is the only way to run a society and to share resources. Another idea is economies of scale. I'll just briefly say, I heard on the radio last week in Paraguay, 75% of the rainforests have been cut down to plant one crop, and that is called soya, right? And this is done by large tractors and combine harvesters, so fewer jobs. One crop destroys the land. Monoculture. Remember monoculture? We are living in the monoculture of materialist economics all over the world, right? So the same microcosm. So we are destroying the rainforest with our monoculture. We are planting one crop, right? And that crop means all the indigenous cultures of Paraguay struggle to even survive and keep their culture alive. So you got Actually, there is culture in modern society, but it's a very selfish, materialist culture. And that culture needs to be challenged at its root because it's unsustainable. And all the institutions like stock markets that come out of that culture and that mindset need to be reformed to create a society, sustainable society. Thank you.
Excellent. No, thank you for that. So I'm just going to move on slightly, but go back to talking about the culture and behavior change. So government's recent research report on the principle for successful behavior change said that policy should be based on evidence, and we've just spoke a bit about this. Are there examples to show that a shift in behaviors, societal behaviors, would have a positive impact on climate change?
Yes, I mean, there is actually, I mean, as I said, there's science that's good, sound science that give us information that we need on how to make change. And then there's distorted science, where it is about fixing things instead of trying to do the things that prevent it in the first place. So we've arrived at the point that we're now getting science that does tell us where we have gone wrong. For example, food waste is one of this. The amount of emissions coming from food waste is tremendous. We don't get emissions just from traffic or whatever, we also get it from food waste. And graphically speaking, this is a very clever graphic. If you represent the emissions from food waste as a country, it would be the third largest country in the world. So it is actually a tremendous thing. And this is something that the population has some control of, and government has not that much control, because each individual can stop wasting so much food. In the UK, we're told we waste something like 20 to 30% of our food. It is that ridiculous. You know, we, for example, with among ethnic minorities like the Indian population, the Chinese population, some of our vegetables are very fragile. They don't last very long. You have to buy them every second or third day. You can't buy them 2 weeks before because it just won't keep. But in the supermarkets, you buy them and they say they will keep, and they have sell-by dates and so on. And actually they don't keep, and people are so busy. They shop once a week instead of every 2 or 3 days and so on. And a lot of the food just go to waste and goes down the drain. So these are lifestyle things that are so close to us that we can do so much by understanding what is exactly happening. So this kind of a scientific analysis does help us, but we should never have got there. Like I said, science is being used as the fixer. We go wrong and then science tells us. Why don't we never go wrong in the first place? Like Atul was talking about. We should not start doing this. We should start by preserving nature and ourselves, honoring it with our lives in a way that we don't need that kind of science.
Shyam, I would reverse your question. You ask for evidence. We as a human species have been here for about 300,000 years, and it's the last 200 years which have completely devastated our environment, right? So here's the evidence, Shyam, that you're seeking, right? Let's go back to how we used to live before the last 200 years.
How interesting.
We used to live in villages, not cities.
Yeah.
We used to live in communities, not hyper kind of individualist. Not, as Thatcher said, there is no such thing as society. You know, they actually, you know, the West has destroyed that sense of society. You know, and yeah, that you can't get any better evidence than that. You know, people talk about overpopulation. That, you know, that is our biggest challenge today. Somebody on the radio was saying that people should not be allowed to have 7 children. But overpopulation also comes out of deep financial insecurity and deep exploitation of ordinary people. That's how population comes. If people were contented, you wouldn't get overpopulation. So, at heart, culture is so central to climate change, because culture embodies ethics, it embodies values, it embodies wisdom, and the world at this time, just as it needs a net zero carbon-free society, it needs a total cultural renewal. And that the answers to all of that are right there in front of our eyes, if we care to see them.
Okay, so following on from that, here's a challenging question. So we know this climate change issue is here, it's now, and something needs to happen. Do you really feel that social behavior or culture can change quick enough?
My short answer is no.
That's your short answer. Go on, Judy G. I want to hear what you say.
A lot of people are beginning to wake up. And I just hope that they're waking up fast enough. When we talk about the ideal of democracy, in a democracy, the government is supposed to be the servants of the people. Obviously, it is not the case at the moment. If you look at the COP26 at the moment, all the people flooding into Glasgow to protest, are they going to listen? Or are they going to go into their little rooms and actually make their own decisions without us? We want a better world and a better future for all our children. Because, my goodness, like Atul ji said, in a short time, we have destroyed something beautiful and marvelous. And now we got to go in reverse to try and fix it. So many of the things that industry and so on dream up, even as solutions like net zero. I keep saying we don't want net zero, we want real zero. What's the difference between net zero and real zero? Industry says that, we can continue to pollute, but we're over there, we'll plant some tree as a balance, so you come to net zero. But actually, science tells us when you release carbon dioxide, it's going to stay in the atmosphere for 300 to 1,000 years. So we want real zero, where we just stop. We have to stop. We can't just pretend by having net zero and balancing it out. How do you balance something out that's up there for 300 to 1,000 years? So all these things has to be in people's minds, and we need to voice ourselves about what we need to stop in order to have a future.
I mean, I think, Shyam, the growing vegetarian and vegan movement in the world is a sign of hope. We know the huge environmental impact of a non-vegetarian diet. But here again, Shyam, lies an opportunity for the audience of VM. We need to show the world that, compassion and kindness is not just about food choices, that there is a compassionate economics, there is a compassionate way of living with family, with relatives, with community, and alongside the vegan diet, we have a vegan culture or a vegetarian culture, a culture which respects people and behaves in a respectful, simple, humble, kind way. So I think there is tremendous opportunity for us in this time. And I think that if only our young people can take pride in their tradition, and dive deep into studying it and living it more and more, we would be in a much better place, I think.
Sure. Okay, but you've outright said no, you do not think culture can change quick enough. So I'll ask another question. We've just been in the COVID pandemic. The UK felt empowered to fight COVID, including behaviors such as wash hands, stay home. Is there something here we can learn from? Is there something that can be done towards climate change which can force or shift behaviors which would help climate change?
To a certain extent, but everything is structural, that we are actually, no matter who we are, we're inside the structure of economics that is very powerful. For example, one of the greatest things that would change things is simply equality. For example, if you look at examples like Singapore and so on, you see that when living conditions increase and are better, the population falls. Because anybody given a choice of having jobs, a choice of having better quality of life, they don't have dozens of children. They want proper, good quality lives, and the population falls. So all these things are really tied together about economics, equality, the love for people and the love for nature, the dharma, the spirituality of thinking and so on. They're all bound together to move us in quite a different direction. But if we have all these destructive things in place where we do not care for people and we just exploit them in economics and so on, we do not care for the earth and we destroy it, then there is no future. And we have actually now no choice. We have to change very fast.
Yeah, we have to change very fast. I totally agree with that. And Atul ji, can you see how maybe economics can change? Is there a way that there could be economic incentives? I know that there's been subsidies on electric cars, there's been grants on insulated homes or replacing boilers for heat pumps. Is there a way that we can have this quick shift in the behavior that Judy G's talking about?
Yeah, Shyam, about 15 years ago, students of economics at University of Manchester started an intellectual rebellion. They actually said that this economics that they are being taught has very little to do with the real world and does not help cure the problems of the real world. And the movement is called Rethinking Economics. And it's now become a global movement led by young people. And by coincidence, and my book is about reinventing accounting and finance education, which is a subset of economics. They approached me, and I'm actually meeting with the founder on Monday to look at how we can now infiltrate the accounting and finance curriculum, which is so damaging to modern society, to the planet, and to inequality, and how that can be reformed. So there is a little bit of hope. I think young people have a tremendous sense of idealism, and we've seen that with Greta Thunberg, having such a global impact. So as a society, and our elders in our society should really learn to listen to young people, to support them in this passion and idealism, to encourage them to pursue these kinds of alternative methods and careers. I myself have been so blessed to have such gurus in my life, but I think we could do much more to help young people become more secure and self-confident, rather than pass on our own insecurity to them.
Okay. And a slightly different question for you, Judy. You just said that net zero is useless. You need real zero, because there's no point somebody emitting carbon and then growing trees somewhere else. What are your thoughts on our recent ideas of carbon tax? So therefore, taxing activities that are bad for the environment.
All these things are just a delay to the real issue. The real issue is that we got to stop putting carbon into the air. That is it. There's just too much of it up there now. And you have seen that we now have changes of climate and so on that we are already suffering. In Madagascar, they're starving from the ruination of their farmlands, of rising seawater, no rain and all this sort of thing. It is actually happening now. It is not somewhere else. So to delay anything from stopping carbon is for me just a nonsense. You know, if science is so clever, let them find the alternative, I say. You know, let's concentrate on that and stop putting carbon into the air. 300 to 1,000 years. We can't live with that, to have more put up into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
I mean, Judy, you say that, but there were massive forest fires in California,
Yes.
flooding in New York.
Yes.
And yet, you know, a lot of the climate deniers
Yes.
are also
They
in
obviously
California
don't live in California.
and New York. So, you know, the evidence is there, but some choose not to listen. Or in a sense, we've got too much concentration of financial and political power, which is very difficult to shift, unfortunately. So now, in a sense, politicians have also become puppets of the super rich,
Yes.
which is sad. And, you know, I would hope that Boris Johnson announces next week that he's gone completely vegetarian. And, you know, the leader should walk the talk, you know, and how he's going to change his lifestyle to make sure that he leaves a light footprint, not a heavy one.
It's young people, like you say, Atoji, it's really, I look to them for the future. You know, every year a generation comes out of school. It's actually faster than one thinks. In Germany, they're now having young leaders going to the government. We've got young leaders in Germany within government who go to work on skateboards. And this is what we want to see. I've been saying to young activists, I said to them, don't just campaign, head into politics, I say. Because even all the things that we dream of, Aduji, like a change of how they teach in schools and so on, the government is in the grip of what is being taught. And so all these things that damage society are structurally set in there, and we've got to change drastically towards the Dharma, towards the different ways of thinking that lead us into very different behavior and into difference at the top. The young people have got to get there fast.
Yeah, so the message to the audience is, the simple rule is stop emitting carbon, but you can't do everything and we need some help from the government. So my question to you is, does policy shape societal behaviors, or does societal behaviors shape policy?
Well, at this very moment, there's a great movement in this country for diversity, equality, and inclusion. And Black Lives Matter has pointed to the fact that everything is structural. So there are huge campaigns, for example, to get people from ethnic minorities into decision-making structures. Now, we have done this because of the huge accent on diversity, equality, inclusion, but it has to be done in every facet of society. We've been so pressurized as ethnic minorities that somehow we've now found the strength to begin to push for this. But there are many disadvantaged groups besides us, and we all need to push. And we want the mainstream to be with us to transform that structure of decision-making where new people come in and change the society.
Sure. Thank you. And Atulji, just taking that a little bit forward, how much consideration do you think is taken into what society wants when creating a policy?
Sadly, policymakers will look at the average, and really there is no such thing as an average person, you know. And unfortunately, that's also how very often policy fails. You know, fails. Each and every one of us are different, and that difference should also be respected and celebrated. And yeah, society makes policy, and society also gets affected by policy. So to some extent, I think localism is definitely a way forward. So let people try to, within their own control, whatever is within their own control, try to do things which do not harm nature and that are respectful of nature and animals, and hopefully lead to a better, healthier lifestyle for themselves also, and well-being. And let politics take care of itself.
Thank you. We've covered quite a lot, I feel, in the last hour. I don't believe an hour's already flown by, and I've been told by my team that I need to go to Q&A. So we've been having a lot of questions coming in from the audience. Please keep them coming in, and we'll start with the Q&A round. And we have our first question from Nakul Rajani. He asks, is there any way in which we can reshape our economic system to take more consideration of the environment? Atulji, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, there are lots of ways we can do that, but these solutions will take time. They will not happen overnight. Like, for example, 100 corporations in the world do 70% of the carbon emissions of the world, right? So we need to transform corporate behavior. We need to rein in the power of these corporations and force them to operate in an environment-friendly way. So corporations definitely need to be regulated very tightly, but also their power needs to be curbed, because the bigger they are, the more harmful they have become. So that's one example. We need to change the incentive structures in society, which are more towards greed and materialism, and instead celebrate people and leaders who live simply, who choose not to take $100 million salary as corporate leaders do, and actually control the multiplier of salary, as Judy said. So we could regulate, for example, that the CEO of a company cannot earn more than 100 times the salary of the lowest employee, full stop, right? Things like that. Yes, we can do that. We have the power, because we are society. We have the power to put those rules into force and to sack CEOs who refuse to obey by them. And therefore, and it can happen. And then actually, when we do that, we won't get leaders who are very greedy and selfish, but we may actually get the kind of leaders we really desperately need. Leaders who are happy to be in that job to serve society rather than to exploit it.
Some interesting ideas, Atulji. Thank you. Our next question comes from Brother Bedka. He asks, how do we create a feeling of interdependence in the West? Do we need a cultural root from ancient traditions of the West, or can we just import ideas from elsewhere? What are your thoughts on that? Judy, do you want to have a go at that one?
Yes. We must remember that nature is our teacher too. It's not just people. And it's a loss of contact with nature that is so tremendously damaging. When children are very young, their feelings are very intense, you know. If you expose them to nature, they build intense relationships. Actually, scientific research tells us that many of the campaigners and so on that we have, they are marked out by experience of nature in their childhood. So to reconnect with nature is not just about someone teaching you should reconnect, it's the experience. So that is why the Deputy Secretary General of UN Habitat was saying that the battle for sustainability will be fought, won, or lost in our cities. Because in our cities, it's becoming bleaker and bleaker. There are people who don't know what nature is. I mean, many of the even very beautiful parks and gardens are so formal. You don't get the sense of wildness. You do not get the scale. You know, at Black Environment Network, we used to take some very deprived groups out into the countryside to national parks and so on, and they come back different people. Nature does it for us. To be in the presence of a magnificent landscape, they come back different. We had groups in Birmingham, youngsters, when they came back, the youth workers said he couldn't shut them up. They went on and on about the endless green and why they can't have it in the cities. What can they do in their neighborhood and so on. And one young person said to me that when she walked in the pavement, she used to look at the tree in the pavement as a tree in the pavement. After she had been to a nature reserve and a forest, when she sees that tree, she reconnects with her experience of nature at large. This is how we begin, and making that connection and then extending into knowledge and so on, like Atul says about if we want to do this, how do we do this? How do we engage with law? How do we engage with social and economic frameworks that builds a circumstance where this relationship can actually be expressed? I mean, environmental law has not been strong enough. Many companies think that the fines they get is just a business cost, you know, and it has pushed a group of lawyers, Client Earth, for example, to now fight for a new law, which is called ecocide, which is criminal law, where people damaging the environment to a large extent will be criminalized instead of just paying money to get away with it. So we are moving and people are searching for directions to make and express how we can actually protect people and nature.
Thank you, Judy G. I think I'm just going to tell my wife it's okay for me not to cut the lawn because we need wildlife in the back garden.
Yes, long grass is one of the best things for wildlife.
So next, we've got a question from Anamiko Threll, and he asks, if governments know that the environment is highly degraded, so diminishing, why will government not accelerate a program to better the environment? Will government ever prioritize the planet over economy?
Well, I mean, you could say, Shyam, that Britain hosting the COP26 conference in the UK is an example of Britain not only taking leadership for the country in terms of climate change, but also trying to take leadership for the whole world in terms of climate change. So yes, government can and is to some extent and in some parts of the world trying to do its bit to protect the planet. But to some extent, that does not, that does not excuse us as individuals from not doing our bit. And I think these are wonderful questions that these people are asking. They come from that sense of respect for nature and society, and long may that spirit and value continue. And please do not stop doing your bit in your local neighborhoods and communities and families and societies, because that is how we will build a more peaceful and kinder planet.
Thank you. And I think the next question links really well with that. So we've got a question from Arun Taylor, and he asked, how is a community approach going to solve the big problems? My local area seems to be really environmentally conscious, but I can't see it solving the climate crisis. So come on, can you give us some confidence?
Yes, you know, everything happens at different levels, but you must always be proud of what you do. I always say, never diminish the smallest gesture, because it's by the encouragement of the smallest gesture and its pride that you find the energy for change. And when people come together more and more as webs of influence, and we are in a democracy, the government is supposed to be the servant of the people. So we have a voice that pushes them to change. I think one of the things that's really necessary is the stronger framing of economies and so on, like Atul says, to reframe them and show them to governments about how economies can actually work, because they are not confident. They're terrified that if they change this destructive economy that we have, that everything will collapse. But that is not true. There are many things coming forward, like circular economy and other models, and we need more of them in order to begin to convince those who have power that they too need some confidence in order to change things.
Shyam, I'd like to answer it in a slightly simpler way. In our culture and tradition, we have an amazing philosophy of death. And we say that death leads to renewal. Death is a comma, not a full stop. So I would like to encourage your questioner to take comfort that even if human society is not able to solve this problem, future generations or evolutions will be able to replenish planet Earth. I know it's a hard thing for young people to swallow. It's easier for somebody older to swallow than for a young person. But we have to be realistic that this planet has been destroyed by us as a species. And, our species suddenly waking up and saying, we're going to fix it, is not going to really cut it, because we are the ones, we need to fix our own inner spirit, our own soul. And that takes time, that takes thousands of years of generation. So, let's hope and pray. Prayer is another way of trying to solve the problems. Let's not forget the power of prayer. Let's pray, let's meditate, and let's hope that there will be a global renewal of mindset and a celebration of the ancient wisdoms of the world.
That is so beautifully said, Atul. We are in a culture where we think everything is instant. If we make a decision, then we should have the instant result. It is not like that. There is a healing and a reawakening of wisdom that is massive, and it's not that instant, is it? But as long as we feel that we are trying to move in the right direction, we should be proud of that movement. I think that is what keeps us going. We don't know what will be happening. We might not be fast enough to avert all these disasters. Many of us, and millions of us, might be wiped out of this planet. But if we are moving in the right direction, then that evolution will change.
I hope your message is really hitting home, because you're really saying, maybe we are too late, but it is still important to move in the right direction, because sooner or later the planet will replenish in time, as long as we go in the right direction. So we've got a question from Narendra Patel. Narendra asks, considering the ever-increasing world population, how do we produce the food to sustain all without clearing more and more land, and therefore changing the environment to our detriment? So where does this compromise come? He's asking. We need food to feed the growing population, but we don't want to wipe out land to do it. I think there was we spoke about this earlier, how so much land has been used for food.
I mean, that's a very simple answer to that, but what I don't remember, I can't remember the multiple, but I think it's at least 20 times as much land is required to feed somebody on a non-vegetarian diet than a vegetarian diet. Very, very, very simple equation. So therefore, as Mahatma Gandhi says, there is enough for all of us to eat, if we were to simplify our needs, but there will never be enough for our greed. So it's a very simple, practical answer, and we don't need to worry if we change our diet. And of course, the Indian dharmic traditions, again, have been vegetarian, thousands of years before climate change, right? Let's remind ourselves, before climate change. And therefore, there is, that authenticity is there.
And let's, face the facts. The biggest problem in the world is the failure to share. Right now on this planet, we have enough food to feed everybody, and yet half the planet is starving, and the West is eating so much it's making itself ill. I mean, it's greatly grotesque that our children in the UK are obese. They're 5 years old and they're already so overweight from eating so much that they are going to be ill. We have childhood diabetes from fat children that we have never medically seen before in history. So this is showing the terrific imbalance that we're coming into, where we're actually not showing that kind of astute looking at what is happening into our lives and how we can actually reverse and make it beautiful. The other thing, of course, is equality. As I have said, in every country with better living conditions, the population falls, it doesn't increase. So these are things about equality, about distribution, about actually being able to revisualize what we want as a world that would take us out of the problem.
Thank you, Judy Ji. So we have our last question, and that comes from Brother. Brother asks, there are some ancient traditions which have respect for nature and their core. How do we connect people to those traditions, as Judy Ji suggested?
Well, I mean, this event is a classic example. It's a global event. It's been publicized on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and everywhere. Anybody is welcome. It's in a global language, the language of English, even though that's not the language of, for example, our dharmic tradition. But I think the world, I think more of us should go out and speak about our beautiful tradition in our classrooms, in our schools, and not just speak about it, tell stories, show examples, play the music, do the prayer and the meditation. I was teaching a group of NHS managers this week, and I was just talking to them about breathing and how if we stop breathing, we would all die. But there is hardly any awareness about the science of breathing in medicine or acknowledgement of it. And I asked them, why do you think that is? And they said, because there's no profit. There's no profit in showing people how to breathe. They said it straight away, right? So and prevention. So the whole NHS is actually built like an emergency machine. They want you to fall ill so that they can cure you. But why should we not prevent everyone from falling ill? So let's breathe deeply, and let's show society how to breathe deeply. Let's show, Judy mentioned taking children to nature. Let's them also help to meditate, to experience silence. I've seen it. I've done it in schools with young children. When you do silence and you do breathing with them, they actually calm down. They actually experience the peace immediately inside themselves, in that atmosphere and that surrounding. So when they experience it, the chances are that they're likely to want to continue it in their life. So we are so blessed to have been born in the dharmic tradition. I cannot emphasize that enough. And I say this after decades of scientific study, analysis, and writing.
Okay, well, thank you both for answering all these questions. And thank you for the audience for all the brilliant questions we've been able to bring to this conversation. Time has flown, and we've now come to the end of the Q&A. So we're going to move on to our closing remarks. Again, just because of how interesting it is, I've been pushed on because time is moving on. So let's do the same same sequence as before. Judy G, if you could go first, I'll ask you your closing remarks, and if you can give us, you've got 3 minutes for your closing remarks. And Judy G, can you give a summary on the ideal culture which is required to sustainably tackle climate change, yet continue to be a progressive society?
We are living in an age of tremendous knowledge, and yet all the knowledge is bent towards the technical. We need to revive that equally ingenious knowledge of culture and traditions and wisdom to stand alongside science. I believe in science, but I also believe in wisdom, and the two can move together, moving from the center we call the heart. We need to recognize where true power lies. And when we actually experience the terrifying and magnificent power of nature, there's no doubt that there's more power in actually life itself. The whole system of life that includes us has got to feed each other. We need to recognize that nature feeds us, and all our actions must also feed nature. Although we're so-called intelligent and conscious creatures, we're actually quite stupid. We have lost that vital link, that power that enables life must be cradled and loved and maintained for ourselves to have a wonderful life. We must identify with nature and have the love for nature and for people that will really take us positively into a sustainable future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judy G. And Atul Ji, for your closing remarks, can you give a summary on how policy can be formulated to sustainably tackle climate change?
I would say that the policy should challenge this very idea of progress, that in so many ways we have actually not progressed, we have regressed. And therefore, the policy should go more towards celebrating ancient traditions and cultures and bringing their science of sustainable living. Remember, cultures which have survived thousands of years must have a hidden secret within them. That is why they have survived. They have sustained themselves. That is direct scientific evidence of sustainable living. These cultures should be allowed to show the world a better way. They should be allowed to teach their science to the world. The science of breathing, the science of yoga, the science of meditation, the science of family and community, and the science which embraces all of nature, not just human people, not just humans, but all living beings. When I taught my son, when he was young, not to kill an insect, not only did he learn not to kill an insect, but he also learned how to support the weak and to lift up the poor. And today he is 22, but that message has gone very deep into his psychology. So we all need to teach our children not to harm insects, and the world will be a better place.
Thank you, Atul Ji. And thank you very much to both of you. It's been a really good discussion, and I really enjoyed it and learned a lot, more importantly. We've discussed what type of culture is required to build the foundation of achieving a sustainable planet, and how this culture can be achieved. And we've even explored ideas on how policy can be formulated to sustainably tackle climate change. I'm really hoping that the leaders of our country are also watching, and they can take some of these brilliant ideas from both of you that have shared with us. So thank you very much, and that does bring this manthan to a close. So thank you very much to the audience as well for watching.
Yeah. If people want to know more about my books and research and writings, atulkshah.co.uk is my website. And I have a YouTube channel, I have a Twitter and a LinkedIn. Please join me and let's try and do our bit to save the planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Well, this brings our Vichar Manthan to a close. Thank you all for watching this evening and for all your engagement. As always, we wish to remind you that VN is run entirely by volunteers. Nobody in the organization is paid for their time or efforts. The financial contributions of our well-wishers support the organization and the costs of maintaining the core infrastructure. If you would like to become a well-wisher, either follow the link in the chat or scan the QR code which you can see on the screen now. And to stay up to date with all our events, please join our mailing list at www.vicharmanthan.org/mailing list. On our website, you can also you can see the books that we're reading in our book clubs. Feel free to join our book clubs, which are run virtually. So there is no excuse. Wherever you are, you have the opportunity to join. So that's the end of it for this month, but we have our next event on the 13th of November at 7 p.m. and the topic is, are prisons fit for purpose? We hope to see you all then. Namaste.